Let me ask you something before we begin. Have you ever been in a room full of people and felt completely invisible? Like no matter how hard you tried, how much you worked, how many times you smiled through pain, the world just looked right through you? Because that was Emma's entire life. 24 years old, working 2 jobs, sleeping 4 hours a night, eating whatever was left in the break room fridge because groceries were a luxury that came after rent, after medicine, after sending money home to her sick mother in a small town 300 miles away. Emma was invisible. And then one rainy Tuesday night in November, she walked into the wrong elevator. And the most dangerous man in New York City looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in either of their lives. His name was Nicholas Hale, 36 years old, worth $14 billion. Owner of Hale Industries, a company that touched everything: real estate, tech, pharmaceuticals, media. If you used a phone, lived in an apartment, or watched the news in this city, Nicholas Hale had already made money from you without you even knowing his name. Cold, calculating, brilliant, and completely, utterly alone. This is the story of what happened when 2 people, from worlds that were never supposed to touch, couldn't stay away from each other. And how loving the wrong person at the wrong time can either save your life or destroy everything you've ever built. Stay with me, because nothing about this story goes the way you think it will. Emma Reyes had a gift for making hard things look easy. That was the problem, really. When you're good at surviving, nobody notices that you're barely surviving at all. She grew up in Heron Falls, a small, forgettable town in upstate New York where the diner closed at 8 and everyone knew your business by 9. Her father had left when she was 7. Not dramatically, not with a fight or a scandal. He'd just gone. Packed a bag on a Wednesday morning, kissed Emma on the forehead, and walked out the door like he was going to buy milk. He never came back. Her mother, Rosa, raised Emma and her younger brother Danny on a waitress's salary and an iron will. Rosa was the kind of woman who sang while she cooked and cried only when she thought no one was listening. Emma used to press her ear against the bedroom wall at night and hear her mother's quiet, muffled sobs, and she'd make herself a silent promise. I will fix this. I will fix all of it. I just need time. She got into college on a scholarship, studied business and finance, graduated top of her class, moved to New York City at 22 with $200, a duffel bag, and the kind of hope that can only exist before the city has had a chance to teach you better. New York taught her fast. The scholarship money ran out. The entry-level finance job she'd imagined turned into an unpaid internship that turned into a rejection email. She took a job at a coffee shop, then another at a hotel front desk, working the overnight shift from 11 at night to 7 in the morning. She was 24 now, and this was her life. Sleep from 8 a.m. to noon. Work the coffee shop from 1 to 8. Try to eat something. Take the subway to the hotel. Stand at a marble desk in a stiff blazer all night, checking in guests who didn't make eye contact, fielding calls from people who called her sweetheart in a way that was not meant kindly. Go home as the sun came up. Repeat. And every Sunday, without fail, she sent $300 home to her mother. Rosa had been diagnosed with a chronic heart condition 18 months ago. The medication alone cost $400 a month after insurance. Emma had taken on the cost without telling her mother the full amount, because Rosa would have refused the help and gone without the medicine, and that was simply not an option Emma was willing to accept. Her apartment in Queens was small enough that she could stand in the center and almost touch both walls. She had a bed, a second-hand desk, a window that faced a brick wall, and a spider plant she'd named Gerald, who somehow refused to die despite Emma's erratic watering schedule. Gerald was honestly her most reliable relationship. She had friends, loosely. May, her co-worker at the coffee shop, who was sharp and funny and always brought Emma soup when she looked tired. Carlos, the overnight security guard at the hotel, who always saved her a newspaper and told her she was going to be famous someday. She appreciated them. She just didn't have the energy to invest as much as she wanted to. Most nights, riding the subway at 10:30 p.m. with her feet aching and her eyes burning, Emma let herself feel it, just for those 20 minutes underground. The exhaustion, the loneliness, the quiet terror that this was it, that she was running as fast as she could on a treadmill that was going faster than her. And then the train would pull into her stop, and she would put it away, fold it up, tuck it somewhere behind her ribs, Because Emma Reyes did not quit. It was not something she was capable of. It was a Tuesday in November. Wet, cold, the kind of night where the rain felt personal. When Emma's coworker called in sick 30 minutes before the overnight shift began. The hotel was fully booked. A major corporate event had taken over the top 3 floors. Emma knew it was going to be a brutal night, but she pulled on her blazer, fixed her ponytail, and walked in through the service entrance just like always. What she didn't know, what she had no way of knowing, was that the corporate event on the 42nd floor belonged to Hale Industries, and that Nicholas Hale himself was in the building. At 11:45 p.m., Emma's feet were already killing her. The event upstairs had created a circus on every floor. Room service orders coming in non-stop. Guests calling down to complain about noise. One man on the 38th floor had called 3 times about his television remote, and Emma had personally walked up 14 flights, because both service elevators were occupied, to exchange it. She was on her way back down when she made her mistake. Exhausted, distracted, already composing tomorrow's to-do list in her head. She stepped into the private elevator on the 42nd floor without realizing it was private. The doors slid shut behind her, and then she noticed him. He was standing at the far end of the elevator with his back to the doors, jacket off, sleeves rolled up, staring at his phone with the kind of furious focus that made the air feel tighter. He was tall, dark hair, slightly disheveled, like he'd run his hands through it too many times. Jaw set hard. A small scar below his left eye that somehow only made his face more striking. He didn't look up. Emma pressed herself slightly toward the wall, jabbed the lobby button, and stared very hard at the floor indicator, willing herself invisible. She was almost going to make it, and then his phone rang on speaker, and the voice that came through was loud enough to fill the whole elevator. "Nicholas, the Meridian deal. We have a problem." The man, Nicholas, turned slightly at the sound, and that was when he saw her. His eyes were gray. Not a warm gray, a cold, precise gray, like a winter sky right before it does something serious. He looked at her the way a person looks at something they don't expect to find in their space. Not rude, just assessing. "Hold on," he said into the phone, his voice low and deliberate. He looked at Emma. "This is a private elevator." His tone wasn't cruel. It was just a fact, delivered flatly, the way you might say the sky is blue or water is wet. There was no hostility in it. There was also no warmth. Emma felt heat climb her neck. "I'm sorry. I didn't realize," she started. "It's fine." He turned back to his phone. Stay," like she was a dog, or a piece of furniture he'd decided to permit. Emma's exhaustion, the 14 flights of stairs, the broken television remote, the $300 she'd sent home last Sunday. All of it condensed into a small, bright point of irritation behind her sternum. She pressed the button for the next floor down, intending to get out and take the regular elevator. "I said stay," he said, without looking up from his phone. "It's faster." "I heard you," Emma said. "I'm getting out anyway." Now he looked up, not with anger, with something closer to surprise, like he genuinely didn't know what to do with that sentence. He stared at her for a moment. She stared back. The elevator opened on the 40th floor. Emma stepped out, nodded once. Professional, composed, and let the doors close between them. She stood in the empty hallway for a second, heart beating slightly faster than normal. What was that? She thought. She had no idea. But 30 feet above her, Nicholas Hale was still staring at the closed elevator doors. And for the first time in a very long time, he was not thinking about the Meridian deal. He asked about her the next morning. He asked the hotel manager, casually, between reviewing contracts, who was the woman on the overnight front desk. The one with the dark hair and the hotel blazer. The manager, clearly flustered, told him her name, Emma Reyes. Nicholas said nothing, filed it away, went back to his meeting. He told himself it meant nothing. He'd simply noticed someone unusual, someone who had spoken to him in a way that almost no one did anymore. It was a curiosity, a blip. He'd forget about it by Thursday. He did not forget about it by Thursday. On Friday, at 11 p.m., a white envelope appeared at the hotel's front desk, addressed to Emma Reyes by name. Inside was a brief, handwritten note on heavy cream stationery. "You were right to get out. For what it's worth, the regular elevator is slower.
Nha.
Emma read it twice. Then she held it up to May at the coffee shop the next morning, because she genuinely needed a second opinion on whether this was charming or alarming. May stared at it. She said slowly. Emma, is this? I don't know, Emma said. Emma, look up Hale Industries. Emma looked it up. She stared at the screen for a long time. Oh, she thought. Oh, this is a terrible idea. She told herself she wasn't going to think about it. It was a note. A single note from a man who probably sent 100 such gestures a week. To assistants, to employees, to women he barely noticed. It meant nothing. She put the note in the drawer of her second-hand desk, face down, and went to sleep. She dreamt about gray eyes. 3 weeks passed. November became December. The city put up its lights, and the cold came down hard and permanent. Emma was walking home from the coffee shop on a Thursday evening, head bent against the wind, when she heard her name. Emma. She turned. He was standing outside a black car, one hand on the door, wearing a long dark coat that probably cost more than 3 months of her rent. He looked exactly like she remembered. Precise, a little severe, except that this time there was something different in his expression. A kind of uncertainty that seemed foreign on his face, like it didn't quite fit there. She stared at him. How do you know where I didn't, he said. This is coincidence. I have a meeting 2 blocks from here. He paused. Though I'll understand if you don't believe that. She studied him for a moment. He didn't look away. He didn't rush to fill the silence. Most people rush to fill the silence. Thank you for the note, she said finally. Something shifted in his expression. So quick she almost missed it. You're welcome. Another pause. The wind cut between them. Can I? He started, then seemed to reconsider the sentence. He tried again. There's a coffee shop on the corner. Would you? I just finished a shift at a coffee shop, Emma said. There's a restaurant, then. You're asking me to dinner. I'm attempting to, he said, with what she recognized with mild shock as wry humor. Emma looked at him, looked at the car, looked back at him. Every sensible, rational cell in her body was telling her to say no. He was $14 billion of complicated. She was a girl who couldn't afford her own prescription glasses, who had Gerald the spider plant and a drawer full of unpaid ambitions. This was not a story that ended well for the girl with the worn-down shoes. 1 coffee, she said. 30 minutes. Then I have to go home and sleep. He nodded once, like a contract had been signed. 30 minutes, he agreed. They were there for 2.5 hours. She didn't know how it happened. She hadn't planned it. But Nicholas Hale, it turned out, asked questions. Real questions, not small-talk questions, not the performative interest of someone waiting for their turn to speak, but the questions of someone who was genuinely, almost uncomfortably curious about her answers. He asked her about Heron Falls. He asked what it was like studying business while working 2 jobs. He asked about her mother, cautiously, after she'd mentioned her, with a quietness that she read as real sensitivity. And Emma, who had learned to keep herself private because the world generally didn't reward vulnerability, found herself answering. She told him about Rosa, about the medication, about the Sunday transfers. She didn't say it for sympathy. She said it the way she said everything, matter-of-factly, as context, as part of the map of her life. He listened without interrupting, without the expression people sometimes wore when they were calculating how to respond or deciding whether your life made them uncomfortable. He just listened. When she finally turned the conversation back to him, "Your turn. Tell me something real." He was quiet for a moment. "I don't usually do this," he said. Talk to people I don't need anything from." She looked at him for a beat. "That's a sad thing to say." "Yes," he said, without deflecting. "It is." She went home that night with a strange feeling in her chest. Not quite hope, she was too practical for that. More like the sense that a door she hadn't known was there had just swung open an inch, and the light coming from behind it was unfamiliar. She opened the drawer, turned the note face up. Nha. She left it that way. December moved quickly. They started meeting twice a week, then 3 times, always quietly. A restaurant outside his usual circles, a gallery on a Tuesday afternoon, Once a long walk through Riverside Park in the snow because he'd asked if she liked the snow and she'd said absolutely not, and he'd said neither do I, and somehow that had turned into 2 hours outside. Nicholas Hale did not, as a rule, make time for anything that didn't generate value. His days were scheduled in 15-minute blocks. His calendar was managed by 2 people. The concept of unstructured time, time that existed for no purpose other than itself, was something he'd stopped allowing himself years ago. He didn't entirely understand why Emma was different. She didn't ask him for anything. She didn't try to impress him. She pushed back when she disagreed, calmly, directly, without apology. She laughed at things he said that weren't even meant to be funny, and somehow, hearing her laugh made him want to say more things in the hopes it would happen again. He caught himself, once, at 2 a.m. in his penthouse, sitting at a desk covered in acquisition documents, thinking about a story she told him about Gerald the spider plant. He set down his pen. This is a problem, he thought. He knew, rationally, clearly, that his world was not built for someone like Emma. His life had 3 categories of people. People who wanted something from him, people who feared him, and people who had been paid to be there. Emma fit into none of those categories, and it made her simultaneously the most refreshing and the most alarming person he'd ever encountered. It also made her a target, because in Nicholas Hale's world, vulnerability was currency. And the moment anyone in his orbit realized that Emma Reyes had somehow gotten under his skin, he shut down that line of thinking. Not yet. He wasn't ready to look at it yet. Emma was falling, and she knew it, and she hated that she knew it because knowing didn't help at all. She started noticing things. The way he turned his entire body toward her when she spoke, as if the rest of the room ceased to exist. The way he always made sure she had something warm to drink before he started talking. The scar below his eye that he'd never explained and she hadn't asked about, but that she thought about more often than was reasonable. He was not easy. He was guarded in ways that felt structural, like he'd built walls and then built rooms inside the walls and then put locks on the rooms, and he was only now cautiously handing her keys one at a time. But piece by piece, she was building a picture. His parents had divorced when he was 12, messily, publicly, with lawyers and tabloids and 2 adults who had treated their own child like a bargaining chip. He'd started his first business at 19, not because he'd been passionate about it, but because he'd decided the only way to be safe was to be powerful enough that no one could hurt him again. He'd built himself into something untouchable. And then Emma had walked into his elevator and looked him in the eye and stepped out anyway, and something had cracked. She told him this one evening. Not cruelly, but honestly, because honesty was the one thing she couldn't seem to stop offering him. "You built all of this?" she said, gesturing broadly, meaning his world, his money, his empire, as armor. "But armor doesn't actually keep you warm, Nicholas." He was quiet for a long moment. "No," he said finally, "it doesn't." And then he reached across the table and covered her hand with his. It was the first time he'd touched her. Just his hand over hers. Simple. Barely anything. Emma's breath caught. Neither of them moved. And then his phone rang. He looked at the screen. His jaw tightened in a way she'd started to recognize as something serious. "I have to take this." "Go ahead." He stepped away. She watched his back, the way his shoulders stiffened as he listened. She couldn't hear the words, but she could read his body. Something was wrong. When he came back, the warmth was gone from his face. Not coldly, not directed at her, but like a shutter had fallen, automatic, trained. "I have to go," he said. "Okay." He looked at her for a moment. Something in his expression that she couldn't name. Conflict. Reluctance. A kind of ache. "Emma." "It's okay," she said. "Go." He left. She sat alone at the table for a little while. She didn't know yet what that phone call contained. She didn't know about the board of directors who had started asking questions, or the vice president of his company. A sleek, beautiful, calculating woman named Vivian Marsh, who had been watching Nicholas's schedule changes with very close attention. She didn't know that in the city above her, a war was beginning to form, and that she was about to become the most powerful weapon in it. It started with a photograph. Emma found it on a gossip site, sent to her by May at 7 in the morning with a text that read only, "Emma, call me, now." The photo had been taken 3 weeks ago, outside the gallery they'd visited on a Tuesday. Emma and Nicholas walking close together, her face turned up toward his with an expression that Emma recognized, with a sick, plummeting feeling, as the face of someone who was not just making small talk with a billionaire. The headline read, "Nicholas Hale's Secret? Who is the mystery woman?" By noon, Emma's full name was on 6 separate celebrity news sites. By 3 p.m., someone had found her LinkedIn profile, her coffee shop, the hotel. By 6 p.m., there were 2 people with cameras standing outside her apartment building in Queens. Emma sat on the edge of her bed with her phone in her hands, reading comment after comment, and felt the particular cold horror of having your private life spread open like a map for strangers to pick through. She's not even pretty. What does he see in her? She's probably after his money. Gold digger. She set the phone face down. She didn't cry. She wanted to. She could feel the pressure of it behind her eyes. But she didn't because Emma Reyes had made a practice of not letting the world see her break. And she wasn't going to start now. Nicholas called that evening. "I'm sorry," he said before she could speak. "This shouldn't have happened. My security team." "It's done," she said. Her voice was steadier than she felt. "We can't undo it. I'll handle it." Flat, firm, the voice of someone accustomed to handling things. "How exactly?" "I'll issue a statement." What kind of statement?" she asked carefully. A beat. "Emma." His voice was quieter now. "I don't want to hide this. I don't want to pretend. Be very sure of what you're about to say," she said softly. "Because if you make a statement, my whole life changes. Not your life."
Mine.
"I'll lose the hotel job. They'll say I'm a liability. They'll find a reason. The coffee shop. The apartment. People will," she paused. "Just be sure." Silence on the line. "I'm sure," he said. The statement Nicholas issued the next morning was brief, formal, and unmistakable in its meaning. "Emma Reyes is someone I care about deeply. I ask that her privacy be respected." It was the first time Nicholas Hale had publicly acknowledged a personal relationship in over a decade. The internet went sideways. And 3,000 miles away, in a marble-floored penthouse in London, a woman named Catherine Hale, Nicholas's mother, read the statement over her morning espresso and felt something cold move through her. Her son was finally vulnerable, and Catherine had always believed that vulnerability was the only door through which a person could be destroyed. Vivian Marsh was 34, brilliant, and had been in love with Nicholas Hale since she was 27. Not the soft, hopeful kind of love. The calculated, architectural kind, the love that builds a plan. For 7 years, she had been his most trusted executive. For 7 years, she had made herself indispensable, positioned herself perfectly, waited. And then some girl in a hotel blazer had wandered into an elevator and ruined 7 years of strategy in 3 weeks. Vivian was not the kind of woman who accepted that quietly. She started gathering information about Emma the day the photo was published. Not for Nicholas, for herself. For leverage. Because in Vivian's experience, every person had a pressure point, and pressure points were tools. She found Emma's mother. The medical bills. The missed payment 1 month for months ago, when Emma had been short and had asked for a payment extension from the pharmacy. She found Danny, Emma's younger brother, 20 years old, 300 miles away, who had recently gotten into debt trouble with a local loan company. She compiled everything neatly, and then she waited. Catherine Hale arrived in New York on a Thursday in January. She didn't warn Nicholas. She simply appeared in his office at 9 a.m., perfectly dressed, carrying a Hermes bag and a smile that never fully reached her eyes. "I thought we should talk," she said. Nicholas looked at his mother the way he might look at a weather system, acknowledging it, factoring it in, not entirely surprised. "About Emma," he said. "About your future." Catherine sat down. "I've done some research on this girl." "Don't." "And she's lovely, Nicholas, I'm sure. Hardworking, wholesome. The kind of story the press loves. For now." She folded her hands. "But you know what happens when a woman like that enters a world like ours. She either breaks or she becomes something you won't like. And in the meantime, the board is talking." The share price shifted 2 points when that statement went out. 2 points, Nicholas said flatly. "Don't be contemptuous. 2 points is a conversation that becomes a vote that becomes a coup. You know how this works." She looked at him steadily. "End it cleanly. Now, before she gets more attached." Nicholas was quiet for a long moment. "Are you finished?" "Nicholas. Are you finished, mother?" Catherine looked at her son, at the gray eyes that were entirely hers, that she recognized as the only thing he'd ever taken from her, and she read something in them that alarmed her. He wasn't going to end it. He was never going to end it. She stood, smoothed her jacket. "I hope you know what you're doing," she said. "I usually do," said Nicholas. She left. Nicholas sat alone in his office and stared out at the city for a long time. Then he picked up his phone and called Emma. "Are you free tonight?" "I'm working until 8, she said. 8:30, then. I'll cook." A small pause. "You cook?" "Badly," he said, but with conviction. She laughed, that laugh, and some of the ice in his chest thawed. 8:30, she said. He held the phone for a moment after she hung up. He would fix this. He would protect her. He would keep everything away from her. What he didn't know was that it was already too late. Because while he was on that phone call, Vivian Marsh was meeting with a journalist at a cafe in Midtown. And she was handing over a folder. The article published on a Friday morning under a headline that made Emma's vision blur. "Hail Cinderella. The truth behind the romance." Did Emma Reyes use family connections to engineer their meeting? Emma stared at her phone screen and felt the world tilt. The article claimed, with fabricated but plausible-looking documentation, that Emma's late uncle had once worked for a subsidiary of Hale Industries, and that Emma had researched Nicholas's movements deliberately, had taken the hotel job specifically because Hale Industries regularly used it for events, and that the accidental elevator encounter had been carefully staged. It was completely false. Every word of it. But it was detailed enough to feel real, and it was everywhere by noon. Emma's phone filled with strangers telling her she was a manipulative social climber. Media vans reappeared outside her building. Her coffee shop manager called, uncomfortable, suggesting she take a few days off. The hotel called an hour later and suspended her pending a review. She sat in her apartment and looked at Gerald. Gerald swayed slightly in a draft from the window, indifferent, alive. Nicholas saw the article at 10 a.m. He had it traced to its source by 11:30. Vivian. He sat at his desk with that knowledge and felt something shift inside him, cold and final like a door closing. He called his legal team. He called security. He began the process of dismantling Vivian's access to every system, every database, every corner of Hale Industries that she had spent 7 years inhabiting. Then he called Emma. She didn't pick up. He called again, and again. On the fourth call, she answered. Emma. His voice was tight, raw in a way she hadn't heard before. "I know where that article came from. I'm handling it." "I know you probably believe that," she said quietly. "It's not. Nicholas." She stopped, gathered herself. "I need to ask you something honestly, and I need you to answer me honestly. Always. Do you want me in your life?" She paused. "Not the idea of me. Not the feeling of the first few weeks. Me. Emma Reyes. With her $300 on Sundays and her spider plant and her 2 jobs and all the mess and the publicity and the board and your mother." "Yes," he said. "No pause. No qualification." "Then I need you to understand something." Her voice was steady, but he could hear what it was costing her. "I will not be someone who sits in a penthouse and waits for the next crisis to be handled. I am not someone you protect by keeping in a box. If you want me in your world, I need to be able to stand in it. Not behind you, beside you." Silence. "I know," he said softly. "Do you, Emma?" Another pause, and when he spoke again, his voice was different. Stripped. The armor set down for a moment, completely. "I've spent my entire adult life making sure nothing could touch me. And then you stepped out of my elevator, and within 3 weeks you were the only thing I could think about. That is," he paused, "that is not something I know how to be careful with. I don't have a strategy for this." Emma felt something pull in her chest. "Neither do I," she said. "Come over," he said. "Please." She did. She arrived at his penthouse at 7 p.m. to find that it was not only Nicholas who was there. Standing in the living room, elegant and immovable, was Catherine Hale. And beside Catherine, looking pale and distinctly uncomfortable, was Danny, Emma's brother. Emma stopped in the doorway. "What is this?" she said. Not a question. "Emma," Danny started. "Why is my brother here, Catherine?" Catherine looked at her with something that was almost respect, almost not quite, and said, I thought a family conversation might be useful." Nicholas, who had clearly not known this was happening, was standing to the side with a look on his face that Emma had never seen before. Furious but controlled, like something barely caged. "This is enough," he said to his mother. "Danny has debts," Catherine said smoothly. "I offered to help him with those debts, in exchange for a simple conversation with his sister. About—" "Stop!" Emma's voice cut the room clean. Everyone stopped. Emma looked at her brother. Danny, with his 20-year-old face and his worried eyes and the debt she'd known about but hadn't had the money to fix. She felt the particular grief of loving someone who had been put in the middle of something they didn't ask for. "Danny," she said gently, "wait outside for me." He nodded, visibly relieved, and went. Emma turned to Catherine. And here is where the audience needs to understand something about Emma Reyes. She was not a pushover. She was kind, yes. She was patient. She had survived on very little for a very long time, and that kind of survival either hollows a person out or makes them, at their core, absolutely unbreakable. Emma was unbreakable. "I understand what you're trying to do," Emma said. "You want me afraid. You want me to feel like I don't belong here, like everyone around me is a target, like the safest thing I can do is leave." She paused. "I'd like you to hear me very clearly when I tell you. That is not who I am." Catherine's expression was sharp, calculating. "You're brave," she said. "I'll give you that." "I'm just tired," Emma said simply. "And I'd really like you to leave." Nicholas crossed the room. He stood beside Emma, not in front of her, and looked at his mother. "You heard her," he said quietly. Catherine looked at them both for a long moment. And then, something softened, almost imperceptibly, in her expression. Something that might have been, underneath all the performance, a mother looking at her son and recognizing something she'd been afraid to see. That he was not alone anymore. That someone was standing next to him and he was letting her. She left without another word. The door closed. The room was quiet. Emma exhaled. Nicholas turned to her. His hand came up, slow, careful, and touched her face. Just his thumb, grazing her cheekbone, like he was checking that she was real. "You okay?" he asked. "Ask me in about 10 minutes, she said. He almost smiled. 10 minutes. 10 minutes, she agreed. February, the coldest month. The Vivian fallout was handled. She was gone from Hale Industries within a week, and Nicholas's legal team ensured the article was retracted with a public correction. The media moved on to other stories, the way the media does, searching always for the next bright thing to circle. Emma went back to work. The hotel reinstated her with an apology that felt more like liability management than regret, but she took it because rent was still rent. She picked up extra shifts. She sent her Sunday money home. She and Nicholas found a rhythm. It was not a simple rhythm. It was not the effortless, perfect love of movies. She was too tired sometimes, and he was too guarded sometimes, and there were evenings when he canceled plans because of crises that he couldn't explain, and she went home to her apartment and sat with Gerald and tried not to feel like a footnote in someone else's important life. But there were also afternoons when he showed up at the coffee shop unannounced and sat at the counter for 2 hours, pretending to read documents on his laptop while she worked, just to be in the same room. There were evenings when she cooked dinner in his kitchen while he sat on the counter and told her things about himself. Small, private things that she understood he had never told anyone. There was growth. Painful, real, worth-it growth. He learned to cancel the cancellations when she mattered more than the meeting. She learned to tell him when she was struggling instead of disappearing into competence. They were building something. And then, in the second week of February, Emma's mother collapsed. Rosa Reyes had a cardiac episode in her kitchen at 7 in the morning. The neighbor found her. The hospital called Emma at 7:40. Emma was on a bus to Heron Falls by 8. She sat on that bus for 3 hours with her phone in her lap and her heart somewhere outside her body. She called Nicholas. He answered immediately. "I'm coming," he said. "You don't have to." "I'm coming, Emma." She looked out the window at the gray highway. "Nicholas." She might not. Her voice broke, briefly, and she caught it. "She might not be okay." "I know," he said quietly. "I know. But you will be. I promise you that." He arrived in Heron Falls 3 hours after she did, in a black car on the main street of the smallest town he'd ever been in, without photographers or entourage, in a plain gray sweater and the look on his face of someone who understood that the only thing required of him right now was to show up. He found Emma in a hospital waiting room, sitting alone, hands wrapped around a coffee cup she wasn't drinking. He sat down beside her. He didn't say anything. He took the cold coffee out of her hands, set it aside, and put his arm around her. She leaned into him. She finally cried. Not performance. Not managing herself. Just grief and fear and relief that someone was there. He held her for as long as she needed. Rosa survived. The doctors stabilized her by evening. The next steps would require surgery. Expensive surgery that Emma's insurance didn't cover and that her savings, which barely existed, couldn't touch. Emma sat in the hospital room with her mother sleeping in the bed and did the math in her head, and the math was impossible. She walked out into the hallway. Nicholas was waiting. "I need to handle something," he said carefully. "I need your permission." She looked at him. "What's something?" "Your mother's surgery. The costs." He paused. "I want to take care of it." Emma was quiet. "Emma, don't." Her voice was soft but stopped him. "Don't make this a thing where I feel like I have to say no out of pride or I have to say yes and feel like I owe you. Just—" She pressed her fingers to her eyes for a moment. "Give me a second." He waited. She breathed. "This is her life," Emma said finally, very quietly. "Yes," he said. "And you want to help. More than I've wanted anything in a long time." She looked at him for a moment. This man who had built walls and broken them down, who had offered her his hand at a table and now stood in a hospital corridor in Heron Falls in a gray sweater, and she understood that this was what love actually looked like. Not grand gestures. Not declarations. Just a person standing in a fluorescent-lit hallway saying, "I'm here. Let me help." "Okay," she said softly. "Okay. Okay." Rosa's surgery was scheduled for the following Monday. But on Sunday night, something happened that Emma would spend years calling the worst moment and the best moment of her life. She found the folder by accident. She'd been looking for a phone charger in the study of Nicholas's Heron Falls hotel suite. He'd insisted on staying nearby, ostensibly for meetings he could conduct remotely, and she'd been grateful even though she hadn't said so fully, when the folder slid from between two binders and fanned open across the floor. Documents. Her name. Her mother's name. Medical records. Emma crouched and picked one up. It was dated 8 months ago. 8 months ago. Months before the elevator. Months before the gallery and the park and the coffee and all of it. A report from a private investigator, prepared for Nicholas Hale, detailing the financial situation of one Rosa Reyes of Heron Falls, New York, including her medical condition, her daughter Emma's employment, and a recommended intervention pathway. Emma's hands were shaking. She read it again, and again. She heard the door open behind her. "Emma!" She turned. Nicholas stood in the doorway and saw the folder in her hands and went very still. "Tell me," she said. Her voice was absolutely quiet. "Emma, tell me right now what this is." He crossed the room slowly and sat down. He looked at her the way a person looks when they know what's coming and have decided not to run from it. "I knew who you were before the elevator," he said. The room felt like it was shrinking. "My hotel manager flagged your file during a routine staff review. Your performance reports were exceptional, and my HR department had tagged you for a potential internal promotion." He paused. "I had my team compile background on all flagged staff members. It's standard practice. And you saw my mother's situation." "Yes. And—" her voice didn't shake. She wouldn't let it. "And I—" he stopped, chose the next words with obvious, painful care. "I saw that someone was working that hard for that long to protect someone they loved, and I—" Another pause. "I noticed you before the elevator, Emma. I knew your name. I knew about Rosa. And I arranged to be in that elevator that night." The silence in the room was total. "The coincidence at the coffee shop," she started, "was not a coincidence." She stood up, walked to the window, looked out at the dark street, the small shops of Heron Falls, the place she'd grown up wanting to leave. She thought about the note, the first meeting, every carefully constructed accidental encounter, the research in the folder that had told him exactly where her vulnerabilities were before he'd said a single word to her. She thought about trust, which was not something she gave easily, which she had given anyway, I fell in love with the story you built, she said quietly. I don't even know if any of it was real. Emma, did you feel anything? Any of it? Or was this? She couldn't finish the sentence. She heard him move, then his voice right behind her, raw in a way she recognized by now, the voice that meant all the armor was down. I have never, in my life, felt anything for another person the way I feel for you, he said. Everything after that first week was real. I swear to you. But the first week, she said. The first week was me trying to understand why a stranger in a hotel blazer was the most interesting person I'd encountered in 15 years. She turned. His face was open. No control, no precision, no gray distance. Just Nicholas Hale. 36 years old, frightened, honest. Standing 3 feet away and waiting for whatever she was about to decide. I should leave, she said. I know. I need to think. I know. Nicholas. Her voice, finally, cracked at the edges. How could you? After everything we talked about, how could you let me trust you while holding this? Because I was afraid, he said simply. And I kept waiting for the right moment, and there wasn't one. And I was afraid that if I told you, you'd leave before you knew that it had become real. He swallowed. That's not an excuse. I'm not offering it as one. I'm just telling you the truth because that's the only thing I have left to offer. Emma looked at him for a long time. Then she picked up her jacket and walked out. She went to the hospital, sat with her mother, held Rose's hand in the quiet of a room that smelled like antiseptic and the faint lilac of a get-well bouquet Danny had brought. Rosa, half awake, squeezed her hand. You okay, baby? Her mother murmured. Not quite, Emma said honestly. Rosa opened one eye. The man. Emma almost laughed. The man, she confirmed. Rosa was quiet for a moment. The thing about people who have been hurt, she said slowly, with the wisdom of someone who'd sent a husband to buy milk and waited a lifetime, is they sometimes protect themselves by making the first move before someone else can hurt them. She squeezed Emma's hand again. Doesn't make it right, just makes it human. Emma sat with that for a long time in the dark. Rosa's surgery was Monday morning. Nicholas had arranged everything before Emma had walked out. The best cardiac surgeon in the state, flown in the night before, the best room in the hospital, the procedure fully covered. Emma had come back to find all of it in place, and she had not called him, and he had not come to the hospital, and she had understood from that absence that he was giving her exactly what she'd asked for. Space. The surgery took 4 hours. Emma sat with Danny in the waiting room. They didn't talk much. They held each other's hands like they had as children, waiting for things that were out of their control. The surgeon came out at noon. She did beautifully, he said. Full recovery expected. Danny made a sound that was not quite a word. Emma put her face in her hands. That night, Emma sat in her car in the hospital parking lot and called Nicholas. He answered on the first ring. She's okay, Emma said. An exhale on his end. Quiet, profound. The sound of someone who had been holding their breath for hours. I'm glad, he said. Silence. Nicholas, Emma said. I'm not going to pretend that what you did was okay. It wasn't. You should have told me. I know. I need you to understand that. Ido. But, she paused. I've spent a lot of years deciding what I deserve and deciding it was less than I actually needed. And I'm not going to do that again. She took a breath. I don't want to walk away from something real because it started with a mistake. So I need to know, really know, that you're not going to make a decision for me again without asking. Never again, he said. Immediate. Certain. Emma, I promise you, never again. She believed him. Not blindly, she'd earned the right to believe it, and so had he. Then I'm coming over, she said. And you're going to cook dinner badly but with conviction, and we're going to talk. Actually talk. Yes, he said. And she heard something in his voice she'd never heard before. Not relief exactly. Something bigger than relief. Something that sounded, tentatively, like the beginning of being okay. It did not get simple after that. Things worth having don't tend to. Catherine Hale took longer. She came around gradually. First a cool acknowledgement, then a stiff dinner, then, on a Sunday 9 months later, when Emma brought Rosa to New York for the first time. Something happened at that dinner table that no one had predicted. Rosa and Catherine, Two women who had loved difficult people and survived it found in each other a conversation that lasted 4 hours and ended with a card game and a bottle of red wine. Nicholas had looked across the table at Emma. "I don't understand what's happening," he said quietly. "I think our mothers are becoming friends," Emma said. He stared. "That's wonderful," Emma said firmly. He almost smiled. He definitely smiled. Emma stopped working the overnight desk. Not because Nicholas asked her to, but because a position opened at Hale Industries, applied for on merit in the acquisitions department. She spent 2 weeks deciding.
Consulted mij.
Consulted Carlos. Consulted Gerald, who offered no opinion. She took the job. She was good at it. She was, in fact, exceptional at it, which surprised no one who had been paying attention. Gerald the spider plant eventually moved to the kitchen of a much larger apartment, where it received excellent light from an east-facing window and continued its policy of refusing to die. Nicholas did not stop being guarded overnight. Change like that is slow and real, and happens in small moments rather than grand declarations. But there was an evening, a Tuesday, almost a year after a rainy November elevator, when Emma came home to find him already there, no devices in hand, no meetings scheduled, simply sitting on the couch with 2 cups of tea and a look on his face that was openly, quietly, without armor, content. She sat down beside him. She took her tea. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. He looked at her for a moment. "Nothing," he said. She believed him. "Here is what I want you to carry with you from this story. Emma Reyes never believed she was invisible. She was just waiting for the right person to look. Nicholas Hale never believed he could be reached. He just hadn't met someone brave enough to try. Love does not fix people, but it can hold the space while they fix themselves. And that quiet, imperfect, stubborn, and real is the most romantic thing I know. Thank you for listening. If this story kept you company today, if it gave you something, please come back. There are more stories where this one came from. Take care of yourselves. Good night.